Persepolis, towering columns rise from the Iranian plateau, winged bulls guard the gates, the King of Kings sits enthroned before the tribute of 23 nations. This is the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. Now forget all of it. Travel back centuries before these halls existed to bare highland valleys east of the Persian Gulf. Listen to a voice preserved in the Avesta, Zoroastrianism's oldest sacred text. I know, O wise one, why I am powerless. My cattle are few, I have few men. The same people, the same culture, the distance from that voice to this empire, that's the story. To understand this empire, we need to go back, not just centuries, but millennia. The Avesta, the sacred scripture of Zoroastrianism, preserves a world long before Cyrus or Darius. Its speaker is thrust out from family and tribe. He pleads with God for help. He owns nothing. Compare this to the Psalms of David during his exile in the Judean wilderness. The same tone of raw supplication, a lone voice crying out for divine favor. This is a universal human sound, the powerless turning to heaven. Now set that voice beside the inscriptions Persian kings carved into cliff faces 5 centuries later. Darius at Behistun, I am Darius, great king, king of kings. Ahura Mazda bestowed this kingdom upon me. No vulnerability, no doubt, pure ceremonial authority, something immense transformed between those two voices, and to find what, we trace these highland herders back to their origins. In the 18th century, European scholars noticed something remarkable. Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, bore unmistakable resemblances to Greek, Latin, and German. The word for father, pater in Latin, pitta in Sanskrit. Mother, mater, and mata. These weren't coincidences. They pointed to a single ancestral tongue, Proto-Indo-European, spoken thousands of years ago by nomads on the steppes between the Black Sea and the Caspian. Over millennia, these people migrated in every direction. Some went southeast into India, some west into Europe, becoming Greeks, Romans, Celts, and Germans. One great wave swept south into Iran. The Persians and the Greeks descended from the same steppe ancestors, branches of a single family tree, separated by centuries of migration and thousands of miles. Within this vast family, Greek was the anomaly, a small group that migrated through the Balkans to settle a rocky peninsula. The Persians belonged to the mainstream, the Iranian language branch. Iranian here means a family of related languages, much broader than modern Iran, and the led family was enormous. The Scythians, fierce horse warriors roaming the grasslands of Ukraine and southern Russia, spoke Iranian tongues. The Medes, who built the first great Iranian empire in northwestern Iran, spoke an Iranian tongue. The Persians in their highland valleys near the Persian Gulf, Iranian. Central Asia, stretching east toward the Himalayas, Iranian-speaking peoples everywhere. The Persians could make themselves understood across a territory from the Black Sea to Afghanistan. Greek, by contrast, was confined to a sliver of the eastern Mediterranean. The Persians weren't a peripheral people who stumbled into empire. They stood at the center of the ancient world's largest language community. Shared language mattered, but a shared way of life is what made these peoples truly dangerous. The foundation of Indo-European culture was the horse. On the vast Central Eurasian grasslands, horseback riding wasn't mere transport, it was an entire worldview. The mounted warrior ranged freely across hundreds of miles, struck without warning, and vanished before any retaliation could arrive. This bred an aristocratic reverence for the horseman across nearly every descendant culture, Greek, Roman, Celtic, Persian, and it translated directly into conquest. Around 1600 BCE, the Hittites swept down from the steppes into Anatolia with horses and war chariots seizing lands held by older Semitic civilizations. A century later, the Mitanni did the same in northern Mesopotamia. The great urban civilizations, Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, found themselves outmatched by mounted peoples pouring south from the grasslands, each wave larger and more organized than the last. The Persians, arriving around 550 BCE under Cyrus the Great, were the culmination of this thousand-year pattern. Steppe peoples didn't just raid settled empires, they replaced them. The Persians weren't just inheritors of this steppe legacy, they were its purest living expression. Unlike the Greeks, who'd long forgotten their nomadic origins and built a culture of cities, theaters, and philosophical debate, the Persians in their highland valleys had preserved the ancient ways almost intact. Theirs was a countryside culture, partly agricultural, primarily pastoral, centered on herds of cattle and horses. Boys received a rigorous but simple education. The Greek historian Herodotus recorded it with evident admiration. They trained their sons to ride hard, shoot straight, and tell the truth. Their religion matched this directness. God exists and deserves worship. No elaborate theology, no temples filled with cult statues, no sprawling priestly hierarchies. This wasn't ignorance. It was a deliberate cultural preference for clarity and action over abstraction. Even the Greeks, who prided themselves on intellectual sophistication, found something genuinely compelling in this stripped-down warrior code. When these two branches of the same ancient family finally met face to face, neither recognized the kinship. Sardis, around 546 BCE, Cyrus the Great receives a Spartan herald in his audience hall. The herald demands Cyrus leave the Greeks of Asia Minor in peace, cousin speaking to cousin, separated by over 1,000 years of migration and thousands of miles. One branch had built city-states and democracies. The other had built the world's largest empire. Both carried the steppe in their bones, the warrior ethic, the reverence for horses, the old Indo-European words reshaped beyond recognition. Return to that voice in the Avesta. I am powerless, my cattle are few, I have few men. That voice didn't vanish when the empire rose, it was transformed. The same steppe values that made a herder pray for divine favor gave a king the certainty to conquer the world. The Persian Empire wasn't built by people who suddenly gained power. It was built by a culture that had trained for empire 1,000 years before anyone recognized it, where humility before God and ferocity on the battlefield were never opposites, but the same ancient inheritance.